Coming up on the Ultimate Health Podcast.
I believe that those of us who get sick with chronic illness, is because we are being called to wake up deeper, being called to wake up to who we are in our heart, our soul, our spirit, and maybe somewhere along the way, we got out of alignment with what we came here to do. That's okay. That's part of the human journey. So finding the modality that helps us heal and helps us realign with who we are, I think that's what it's all about.
Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Health Podcast, episode 368. I'm Jesse Chappis and I'm here to take your health to the next level. Each week I'll bring you inspiring and informative conversations about health and wellness, covering topics of nutrition, lifestyle, fitness, mindset, and so much more. And this week, Jordan Younger Albrecht is back on the show. She's the blogger behind the top-read spirituality and wellness blog, The Balanced Blonde. She covers all things wellness, high vibrational living, the plant-based lifestyle, healing from chronic illness, tapping into your creativity and psychic nature, and so much more. Beyond the blog, she is the creator and host of the top podcast Soul on Fire, where she goes deep on a range of topics from nutrition to aliens to entrepreneurship to mediumship. And it's been about 3 years since Jordan has been on the show, and a ton has happened in her life. Last time she was on the show, we were discussing her book, Breaking Vegan. So she went from vegan to no longer vegan. And since she was on the show, she is now vegan again. And we get into that. She's had a wedding. She was diagnosed with Lyme disease and so much more. We had a ton to catch up on. And I just really appreciate Jordan's rawness, her realness, and the depth she goes into sharing her story on today's show. Some of the highlights include her soul-searching trip to Bali, where she hit rock bottom, the overwhelming truth about Lyme disease and co-infections, microdosing psilocybin for chronic pain, how psychedelics have helped Jordan the most on her healing journey, and how water fasting cleanses the body. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too, and I'd appreciate if you could help spread the word, share this with somebody in your life, a friend, a family member. There is so much great information and inspiration here. Spread the good word. Thank you so much. Here I go with Jordan Younger Albrecht. Hello, Jordan. Welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited to chat with you too. I went and looked back at our previous episode we did with Marnie there, and it's been 3 years. So a long time, and a lot has happened in both our worlds. So back when we did that last episode, you weren't married. Now you're married. You've had a new diagnosis, Lyme disease, and you're back on the vegan diet. So lots we can get into.
Yeah, life has changed a lot. I remember recording that with you guys in my old apartment where I lived alone with my cat, and life has certainly changed quite a bit since then.
Well, at that time when we did that recording, it seemed like your health was in a pretty good place. For a timeline point here, let's talk about where your health was at that time.
Yeah, so I may have thought my health was maybe in a good place, but it was around that time, I'm trying to think, around 3 years ago exactly, is when my health started to decline and really take a dip. I think when we talked may have been maybe the very end of me feeling pretty good. And then I started to experience different symptoms like full body hives. I had a uterine fibroid, which I ended up having surgically removed. I started to be very chronically fatigued. But I do believe when we last spoke, I was still holding on to the final shreds of feeling good, or so I thought. And then, things kind of exploded from there. So toward the end of what would this have been?
That would have been 2017 that we chatted.
Yeah, toward the middle to the end of 2017 is when these health issues started popping up. And I was very confused about all of them and what was going on. And at the time, it didn't even cross my mind that all of these health issues could be intertwined and could have the same root cause. I thought my entire body was just breaking down bit by bit and piece by piece. And ultimately, when I finally did realize the following year that this was all the same root cause, similar root cause, and I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, then I realized, okay, the hives, the fatigue, the brain fog, lack of energy, the fibroid that I had, hormone imbalances, gut issues, all of this could be drawn back to Lyme disease, which ended up being a chronic Lyme disease diagnosis, meaning that I had had Lyme for at least a year. But when I look back on my life, it seems that I actually really had Lyme for more like most likely a decade. That was a pretty wild time in my life, and I'm sure we'll get into all the details. But I've been treated for the last 2.5 years, and it's been quite the journey.
So, after we talked and these symptoms started to creep up on you, what was the first step you did before getting diagnosed? Were you already seeing a doctor at that time that you brought these issues up to, or did you find a new doctor? Or what did the path look like to getting that diagnosis?
So I was seeing a few different doctors at that time. I've always geared toward a more holistic approach. So I was seeing a functional medicine doctor, which really combines Western and Eastern medicine practices. I went to my functional medicine doctor, and he really didn't know what was going on. He saw the hives that I had all over my body, which were so itchy, so terrible, so red. They lasted for 10 months. And during that time, I couldn't even sleep at night because I was so itchy and I was in so much pain. It covered every single inch of my body except for my face and my feet. Actually, it was on my face too, just not as bad as the rest of my body. The functional medicine doctor that I was seeing, he looked at it and he said, "Oh, this looks like it could be candida. This is a diet thing." And that just didn't resonate with me. I had been treated for candida in the past. And what I really wanted that doctor to know was this is not candida. I understand candida can be a serious issue for a lot of people. But what I feel like I have is some kind of disease that's taking over my life. I don't feel like myself at all anymore. These skin issues, they're very severe. They're not mild. I just didn't really intuitively feel like candida was the answer. So we treated that a little bit. He put me on some anti-inflammatory supplements, which of course is always going to help when you're having inflammation. But I wanted to get to the root of the issue. So I was also seeing acupuncturists, Chinese medicine doctors. I was traveling. I went to Bali on kind of this soul searching solo trip to see if maybe I can heal myself by taking time off and working with healers and writing and like going the very spiritual route. That didn't work either, although I'm a huge fan of spirituality and I had such an incredible solo trip to Bali. That wasn't the answer for me.
Did you get any improvement in your symptoms from any of the modalities you tried down there?
No, and I really wish that I had, but I really didn't. I was so far gone at that point that those things that I was trying just weren't helping me. I tried combo, which is frog venom medicine. That flared the symptoms up so terribly that I couldn't get out of bed for a week when I was in Bali. And I was just in so much pain. I had a migraine that lasted for a week. And every day I was calling my then boyfriend, now husband, crying and just saying, "I don't feel like myself. This is really scary. I feel like when I get back home, I have to find a doctor. I have to find someone who's going to help me. This is really serious and this is really scary." So I feel like it was on that trip where it really hit me that this was a very serious issue and this was turning chronic. So at this point, I had been dealing with these symptoms for more than 6 or 7 months. I had never really dealt with a chronic disease or chronic anything before. I mean, I had chronic health issues, but I had always felt like they were pretty mild. And this was severe and it wasn't going away. And it also felt, other than the skin, very invisible, which was really scary because from the outside, I really looked like your normal healthy girl doing yoga, very into fitness. I was in Bali, so I had this bronze glow. And if you didn't look closely at the eczema and hives on my skin, I would have looked completely healthy on the outside. But on the inside, I was struggling so much. I had so much brain fog. Some days I couldn't even fathom, like, how did I used to do my work? How did I used to host my podcast? How did I used to write my blog? I thought about these things all the time because I lost all of my energy and all of my motivation and passion for life because I didn't have any energy to live my life. So after that trip, which was 3.5 weeks, I came back and made an appointment with a Lyme specialist. And this was kind of a last resort for me. I didn't know a whole lot about Lyme disease and I didn't really know what it was, to be honest. I had only really seen one public figure who had Lyme disease, which was Yolanda Hadid. She was on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Not sure if you're familiar.
No, not specifically.
She was on that show on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and she got sick with Lyme disease, and the show really captured her experience with Lyme. And that was my only reference point for Lyme disease at all. And because Lyme disease is the type of chronic illness where everyone who has it may have very, very different symptoms from one another. So I had seen it on TV with her. I didn't really relate to her symptoms. She had very different symptoms than I did. So seeing the Lyme specialist was a bit of a last resort because I just felt like I haven't seen a doctor in all these years who has understood what I'm going through, who's really been able to help me. But I'll see this doctor as kind of a last resort because I had friends who had met this doctor and they told me she specializes in a lot of the symptoms that you have, so it's worth a shot. So I made this appointment, and like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of faith that it was going to change my life in any significant way. But I went and saw her. We did a lot of testing. And even before the testing came back, she was very confident to tell me, you definitely have Lyme disease. Your textbook for the symptoms, and I can absolutely help you. It took about 3 weeks for the testing to come back. And when it came back, I was off the charts for Lyme disease and for so many different co-infections of Lyme, like Babesia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Bartonella, all of these infections that often come along with Lyme. And from there, it's been quite the journey to heal. And I also found out at that same time that I was living in a moldy environment. So my apartment that I was living in at the time had mold, and that was really deteriorating my body as well, and had flared the Lyme disease, which had most likely been dormant in my body before I lived in the moldy house. So, yeah, I was immediately put on a lot of supplements, medications, went down the whole rabbit hole of healing Lyme, which is, if anybody out there listening has experienced it, I call it a rabbit hole because it feels like this never ending process. And that's kind of been my life for the last couple years.
Wow, you've been through so much. And just to take it from the very top of this whole process, when you went and got diagnosed, I'm just curious, what kind of testing do they do? What specific tests can they use to determine if it is Lyme?
So that's a very good question. And I'm glad that you asked because there's so many different types of tests that they do for Lyme disease, and only some of them are proven to be quite accurate. So the test that my doctor does is called IGeneX. And if you do get an IGeneX test done, it is a blood test, and you want to make sure that you're seeing a Lyme literate doctor to read that blood test and to go over the results, because if a regular doctor who doesn't specialize in Lyme goes over the results, they might miss something. You might get a false negative or a false positive, which will just continue you down the very difficult journey of maybe not finding the right diagnosis. So it was a blood test, and then we did a series of other tests like urine tests and different things to find out about the mold. And there's another test for Lyme called the Western blot, which is, in my opinion, it's a little bit outdated. It really goes based off of how much Lyme you have in your system. And so the traditional medicine would tell you if you don't have a certain amount in your system, then you don't have Lyme. But most Lyme literate doctors will see that and see if you have any Lyme in your system, then you have Lyme, because it can always get worse. And once it's in your body, over time, it multiplies. So that was kind of my experience in the sense that, like I was saying, I feel like I've had Lyme for probably a decade. Just going back to my life in high school, my life in college, a lot of the symptoms that I had, they were textbook Lyme disease symptoms. And I have so much compassion for that younger version of myself and so much compassion for anybody who's in this position, who's looking for answers. And I started going on that whole journey to find the right type of doctor when I was like 14. So I'm 29. And if that gives you any sense of how misunderstood I felt in the medical community and felt like really nobody could help me, which then kind of pushed me to the point of feeling like, am I crazy? Am I making all this up? I knew I wasn't making it up in my head, but I think any of us who have been through this just roundabout with the medical system for all these years, it's pretty common that you can start to feel like maybe you are just crazy. And I had convinced myself this must be how everybody feels, because I really had no other reference point. I never had a doctor tell me, yes, the way that you feel is valid. Yes, you're sick. Yes, you have a disease. I had always had most of my testing come back normal. So I felt like everybody must feel the way that I feel, and I'm just the only person who can't handle it, who can't deal with it. People must just feel terrible every single day, and people just deal with it. So that's what I have to do too. And it's really sad because I felt that way for so long.
So when you finally get that diagnosis and the tests are showing that you do have Lyme, what goes through your head at that time?
Oh my gosh. I mean, between the time that I was tested for Lyme and the time a few weeks later that we got the results, I pretty much came to terms with the fact that I did have Lyme because I started researching it. And after meeting that doctor and her telling me that she knew so many people who felt the way that I felt and that she had been able to help them, I started learning all about Lyme and reading a lot of books on Lyme, going down documentaries, all that kind of stuff. So I had pretty much come to terms with the fact that I had Lyme, and I was looking forward to going back and hopefully getting the proper diagnosis so I could get the proper treatment. And when I did, I really wasn't prepared for not only being diagnosed with Lyme, but being diagnosed with so many different co-infections. And then on top of it, mycotoxin illness, which is the mold illness, and then parasites in my stomach, gut issues, hormone imbalances, vitamin deficiencies. Because what happens with Lyme and mold is that your entire body just starts breaking down. So I had histamine issues, just levels off the charts, with something called mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, which was what was causing the hives. So not only was I diagnosed that day with Lyme, I was diagnosed with about 15 to 20 different things that all had a name. And I had never been diagnosed with hardly anything except for things like candida, eczema, food intolerances, that kind of stuff. So it was very overwhelming. I pretty much tell people it was a huge celebration because I finally had found a doctor that understood me and validated the way that I felt, and I had never felt in the medical community so seen and understood and supported. So, on the one hand, it was a celebration and a gift. And then on the other hand, it was so overwhelming and terrifying. And I didn't know if my life would ever be the same. I was immediately looking up like Lyme disease and fertility and all these things that, I wanted to learn, like, what is my new life going to look like? And I was very lucky to have my mom with me in that appointment, that initial appointment where I got my diagnoses, because she and my dad and my husband have all been such a support system. So we heard all this. I just started crying. My mom was crying, and basically I felt like, okay, let's do this. Let's start this long road to healing and see what happens.
And as you mentioned, there were so many different things going wrong, and it sounds like Lyme was right at the center of it, causing all this. But from a treatment perspective, I'm curious how that began. And can the doctor go about treating everything at once, or does it happen in layers? How did the process start?
Yeah, so it happens in layers. Right away, she told me there are things that we can do to start the treatment. So that very day, I did Ozone, which is basically where you get an IV put in you and they take out your blood and spin it with fresh ozone, oxygen layer from the ozone, and put it back into your body. So that's something that you have to work your way up to doing 10 passes of ozone, which means you sit there, they take your blood out 10 times and put it back into your body 10 times. So that first day, I did 3 passes of ozone. So I sat there and had my blood cleaned, and then started taking supplements, started taking certain Lyme killing herbs and medications. From the very beginning, I had tried to avoid the antibiotic route for Lyme. That's probably one of the main questions I get asked is, what antibiotics do you take for Lyme, or do you have to take antibiotics to kill Lyme? And there's a lot of different theories out there. People feel really differently about this. I already had such severe gut issues that I wasn't really interested in going the antibiotic route. There's a lot of different scientific studies that show that if you've had Lyme, so if you got the initial tick bite more than 2 weeks ago, which almost everybody, to be honest with you, who gets diagnosed with Lyme, it doesn't happen within 2 weeks, then antibiotics can actually potentially make the Lyme worse rather than making it better. So I was avoiding antibiotics for a long time. After being treated for a couple years and not seeing or feeling hardly any results, I did try a couple rounds of IV antibiotics, which I do think helped. And then I worked my way up to certain things. So once we successfully killed off a good amount of the Lyme bacteria and the viruses in my body, then I could finally start stem cells, which have been pretty incredible, where you get injected with stem cells from a newborn baby, and then those cells multiply in your body, so you're getting millions of new healthy cells, which then start to kill the toxic cells. That's something that I started doing probably about a year and a half ago, and that helped me a lot with at least giving me more energy. So, like, I was still working this whole time. I was still podcasting and blogging, really putting a lot of pressure on myself to continue to show up for my business and my audience. And it was hard because I just had a lot of days where I didn't really have the energy to do that. I think people could tell, even to this day, you can tell I don't have the same amount of energy that a healthy person has. So, like, talking like I'm doing right now, like, it's not the easiest thing for me. And again, that's what an invisible illness kind of is. People just have no idea. So sometimes people are like, why does your voice sound so weak? And I'm telling them it's because I don't have any energy in my body at all. But when you live with a chronic illness and you don't want to give up your life, those are some of the sacrifices that you make. You use the energy that you have. So, yeah, I started doing stem cells that would give me energy for periods of time. I tried so many other things, very alternative things, these are not things that I'm recommending to your listeners, but I'll just tell you a couple of the things that I tried. For example, I started doing plant medicine. So I went on a few different ayahuasca retreats, which was very beautiful and on a spiritual level really helped me get to the root of a lot of like why I became sick and ancestrally going into a lot of that stuff. I started going to a water fasting clinic where I would do medically guided water fasts. So no food for 2 weeks, only water. That was the only thing really that got my inflammation down enough for the hives to go away. Different things like that. I got a sauna and put that in my house so I can sit in my infrared sauna pretty much every day. I, like you mentioned in the beginning there, went vegan again. And that's been a very interesting journey. I know you understand that more than anybody, the journey in and out of being plant-based.
Definitely.
Yeah, and kind of that whole stigma. So I had to just decide I'm going to live for me. I'm going to break any and all stigma. I mean, I wrote a book called Breaking Vegan, which you know.
Which we talked about last time you were on the show.
We did. And so it takes a lot of courage, I think, to be vegan and then to not be vegan and write a book about it and then to say, you know what? I'm going to try the plant-based life again and I'm going to do it for me. And I'm not really going to talk about it publicly. And that's not what it's about. It's about my intuitive decision, kind of feeling intuitively guided to go back to the plant-based way of life for healing. And I did that. I didn't talk about it publicly for probably like 6 months. And that was really nice to have something for me.
And how long have you been back on that diet?
So now it's been, let's see here, coming up on 2 years. No, coming up on 3 years. Yeah, because it was the end of 2017. So before I was diagnosed with Lyme, but after I started experiencing all the symptoms. I was in Bali again, a different time, with Jonathan, my now husband, and he brought it up to me. He said, you know, you always feel really good when you eat plant-based foods, and you always complain about how you feel when you're eating these other foods like eggs, meat, bacon, these things that I was eating on our trip. And so he kind of challenged me to just try it out again. And I was really happy for the permission, for the outward permission from someone else, someone who cares about me, someone who loves me. And I remember saying to him, are you sure? Isn't that weird? Don't you remember what happened the last time? And he was like, yeah, of course, but you've changed. People evolve. You don't have to label it. It doesn't have to be this big thing. Why don't you just try it and see how you feel? So I tried it and it became, you know, something that ended up being this huge, amazing blessing in my life. And then once I started going to the water fasting facility for healing, they teach, so it's a water fasting facility, and they also teach about the salt, oil, sugar free vegan way of life for healing and for living an anti inflammatory life. And it was really in learning about all that that I became so passionate about eating this way and kind of this anti inflammatory, SOS-Free way of life that ended up being a huge part of my healing journey and has helped me a lot so that I haven't gotten those hives back and I'm not in so much chronic pain every day. And it helps. It helps me a lot.
Now I'm going to take a quick break from my chat with Jordan to give a shout out to my show partner, Beekeepers Naturals. Beekeepers is offering an exclusive offer to listeners of TUHP, and it's called the Ultimate Health Bundle. It includes 3 products. First one is bee-powered superfood honey, and this is a delicious combination of all the superfoods of the hive to support immunity, mental clarity, brain health, and sustained energy. Next up on the list is raw bee pollen. This is a powerful and easily assimilated source of B vitamins, minerals, free-forming amino acids, and protein. And the third product is Bee Elixir Brain Fuel. In this one, you get 6 vials in a box. It's a natural nootropic that is caffeine-free, and it's used as a memory and cognitive enhancement. I try and take one of these vials before each time I record so I can think my best behind the mic. As a listener of the show, you get 25% off this Ultimate Health bundle by going to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/beekeepers. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/beekeepers. On top of that, you get free shipping with this bundle. Go and get yourself the Ultimate Health bundle from Beekeepers. It's a great place to get started with their incredible line of products. Now I'm going to give a shout out to my other show partner, Organifi. Organifi Gold is an all-natural organic superfood tea that is designed to help you rest, relax, and soothe. It contains maximum strength turmeric, ginger, reishi mushroom, lemon balm, turkey tail mushroom, coconut milk, and Ceylon cinnamon. Also, it has piperine from black pepper to increase nutrient absorption. To make this tea, all you need to do is add a scoop of Organifi Gold to some hot water and stir. It's organic, gluten-free, soy-free, vegan, and keto-friendly. And as a listener to TUHP, you get 20% off your Organifi purchase by going to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/Organifi. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/Organifi. And Organifi is spelled ORGANIFI. Give this superfood tea a try. It's perfect for sipping in the evenings. And now back to my chat with Jordan. Well, you just opened up a whole lot we're going to dig into with the water fasting and the diet. When did you outwardly tell your audience that you're having these symptoms? Was it before the actual Lyme diagnosis when you started to feel under the weather, or did you wait till you're diagnosed? And then how did they respond to that?
Well, no, I was very open about it the whole time, and it was my audience that helped me get diagnosed because I was posting pretty frequently about these horrible rashes that I had, talking about my chronic fatigue. I recently found these old Snapchats that I had sent out at the end of 2016. So this was a long time ago on Snapchat, which I don't even use anymore, saying, I think I have chronic fatigue. Does anybody have any tips or recommendations for how I can get my energy back? So this was the end of 2016. This is coming up on 4 years ago. So I had shared kind of the whole way through what I was experiencing when I started getting hives all over my body. I would go on my Instagram stories, post pictures, and say, what do you guys think this is? Because I'm completely at a loss and nobody can help me. The doctors can't help me. I'm really scared. And I would get hundreds, actually thousands of responses and comments from people saying, this looks like it could be mold illness. Have you looked into mold in your home? And I had countless people tell me this looks like symptoms of Lyme disease. But I was also getting so much information at that time and so many opinions and so many tips that it was hard for me to really focus on any one thing. But when I look back and I see how many people had told me you should get tested for Lyme, it's pretty incredible that people were so intuitive and so spot on. And also people recognized it because maybe they had been through the same thing or something similar. It was a friend of mine who was more like a distant friend who saw me posting all these pictures. And she's the one who said, this is the name of the Lyme specialist and you should go see her. So she actually sent me that about 6 months before I even saw the doctor. Because like I was saying, I didn't think I had Lyme. It was very much a last resort. I had to really hit rock bottom before I took action on seeing that particular doctor. And it's very expensive to do all this Lyme testing. And it wasn't something I was interested in doing unless I really, hit my rock bottom, which I completely did. So my audience, by the time that I shared with them, I finally have answers. They were so supportive. People were so incredible. People had been on this journey with me since 2013. And when you really put all the pieces together, we could see that all of this was so interconnected and all of it was so related. And so while those symptoms were so much more mild back in the early days of my blog, and even when I wrote my book, I really attributed a lot of that to the vegan diet and my particular way of the way that I was doing the vegan diet back then. And now I view all of it so differently. And I have so much compassion for myself. I'm not hard on myself, like, wow, you were putting so much information out there, Jordan, that may or may not have been, completely accurate. But I was just doing the best that I could any given time in this whole journey with my health. And when I look back on all of it, I see that it was these symptoms from Lyme that I've been experiencing for so long that even inspired me to be interested in health in the first place, which is what inspired me to start my blog and then my podcast. And, my life has changed a lot for the better with all of that. So I do say Lyme is one of my greatest gifts, probably my ultimate greatest gift, other than my husband and my family. But otherwise, it's tough, and anybody who is experiencing it knows that. So, yes, to answer your question, my audience was so supportive, probably even more supportive in general, because I had shared so much about the struggles. So I think people felt so grateful for me that I had answers. Secondly, I think a lot of people follow me because they relate to the way that I feel. And when I shared that I had Lyme, a lot of people from there realized that that was what they were struggling with as well. And that has been such another kind of hidden gem in this whole process, is that other people were diagnosed with Lyme once they learned from what I had shared were a lot of the symptoms.
I do remember you posting a picture or multiple pictures of the rash, and it was super intense. I just didn't know what part of the timeline that was.
Yeah. So that was all part of it. And then from there, I would have some flares of the rash, which I would continue to share. And it's an up and down journey that never really yet has gone away. It's just something that I'm learning to live with and manage. And it's become just a part of my life in a lot of ways.
And when you think back, do you have any idea of specifically when you might have contracted Lyme?
Well, that is the $1,000,000 question. I do not. And to be honest with you, when I have done ayahuasca ceremonies, plant medicine ceremonies, I have sat there and I've asked the plant medicine, I've asked my ancestors in this very spiritual way, the very spiritual way that I live, when did I get Lyme? If you could just show me the scene or the setting or the place where I got it, it would bring me so much, I don't know, clarity, but I don't know. I have a few different ideas, but the thing about Lyme that I think a lot of people really, it's very misunderstood, is that some people still think to this day that you can only contract Lyme on the East Coast because it's much more prevalent in places like New York and Connecticut, and it got its name in Connecticut, named after a town called Lyme, Connecticut. So people think, oh, well, if you don't live in New York, then you can't have Lyme. And that's just a really outdated opinion, given that Lyme is in all 50 states. It's in 80 different countries and counting. 400,000 people are diagnosed every year. And if you can imagine all the people who also go undiagnosed, because it's such a tricky, invisible, confusing disease, I don't know, but some ideas that I have about where I could have contracted Lyme are potentially when I was a child, we would go fishing in Alaska. And when we were in Alaska, I would wade through the water, these like swampy lakes and things that were covered with bugs and flies and maggots. And it sounds kind of disgusting to talk about, but I would have like hundreds of bugs on me. That's one place. I've also had the gift of traveling quite a bit in my life. So I've been to places like Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Bali, all these places where ticks are very prevalent, insects are very prevalent, and it also very well could have happened in California. So that is the current mystery. I'm not sure.
Does it take a tick to contract it, or do other bugs carry it as well?
So now they've been able to show that it's not just ticks, but it's also mosquitoes, which is terrifying because who hasn't encountered a mosquito in their life? Fleas, horseflies, and of course ticks. So they found that now that there's many different insects that can infect you.
Let's come back to your ayahuasca story. I'm curious, where did you do ayahuasca?
So I've done ayahuasca several times now, all in California with a shaman he's from Brazil. He's amazing. He's been on my podcast before and it's been completely life-changing. My husband and I are going to do another ayahuasca ceremony in just a couple weeks that I'm really looking forward to.
What are the specific benefits you've gotten through these experiences?
It's very much a spiritual awakening where you get in touch with yourself in brand new ways, where you can dig deep, and really the plant medicine of ayahuasca, it will take you wherever you need to go and it will show you whatever you need to see. So it's quite different every time. I've processed a lot of trauma in my life through doing these plant medicine ceremonies. I've also connected with my lineage, my ancestors. I've spoken to them. I've seen how this sickness has manifested in my body just based off of things that run in my lineage. And I've also seen that I kind of came to this earth to experience a shift and make a big change for my lineage and do a lot of healing. So I've learned all about this deep inner healing work that I need to do. That I've also seen that I myself have a lot of healer in me. So like I have really awakened to my own inner intuition and these psychic abilities that I've always had, but I haven't necessarily put at the forefront of my life at all. And doing all of this wonderful work with the plant medicine has helped me a lot to wake up to that spiritual psychic version of myself.
Have you tried any other psychedelics along the way to compare to the ayahuasca?
I have. So before I did ayahuasca, I had done a lot of psilocybin, and that was something that I first did, just me and Jonathan, in the desert here in Palm Springs. And that was probably the first thing to really open my eyes to, wow, like we are all one. We are all of the earth. We are these beautiful, magical creatures as humans. And that shifted everything for me. That was at the very beginning of when my health started deteriorating and I was reconnected to my soul, reconnected to my spirit and my soul through that first journey with psilocybin. And since then, I do a lot of microdosing psilocybin, but at the time that I'm talking about, that was more of a macro dose. And that was, I think, a very important thing to do prior to ayahuasca because ayahuasca can get so intense and it can be very dark. So it's something that I think people need to be prepared for if they're interested in it by potentially trying some other lighter psychedelics first.
Talk more about the microdosing and some of the benefits you've gotten through doing that.
I think over time, I just kind of started microdosing as a medicine for me once I realized that the Western medicine way of healing from Lyme was not for me and was not something that I was interested in, and that with Lyme, these are symptoms that I'm going to have to manage for most likely for the rest of my life, although I'm still holding out hope that I can fully heal, and I'm totally calling that in to be a reality for me. But I became very open to these alternative methods. So started microdosing very, very tiny doses of psilocybin, just whenever I want to, basically as often or as not often as I feel like doing. And it's been a creative awakening for me. And it is so peaceful and it brings me back to my soul, my intention, my healing spirit. I always get so many good insights when I'm microdosing, and it also takes away a lot of the pain, the chronic pain that's in my body all the time. So I highly recommend it. I think it's beautiful.
So would you say overall in your Lyme healing journey to this point, the psychedelics have been a pretty important part of that?
Definitely. Definitely. I actually had somebody ask me the other day, what has helped you the most in your healing journey? And I said, without a doubt, it has been psychedelics. And I hesitate to say that on a podcast the way that we're doing because I don't want to give anybody else the idea that that is what's going to heal them or that's going to be the one thing that they need to do if they have Lyme or chronic pain. Because really, the truth is, we are all so uniquely different, beautiful, individual. We all have our very unique bio-individuality and genetics. And for me, for my soul, I totally believe that opening up spiritually is something that I came to this earth and to this body to do. So psychedelics has helped me do that and has helped me immeasurably. I do think that that would be very therapeutic for most people, but it's not for everybody. So I definitely encourage people listening to feel into whether that feels aligned for them. And if it does, they will definitely find the right way to do it and a safe way to do it. And if it doesn't, then that's great too, because it's certainly not for all of us.
And throughout all the years being in the health and wellness world, and I know you're a big yoga enthusiast, have you ever found anything else along the path that is comparable?
Definitely, definitely. I don't think that you have to do psychedelics to reach these higher vibrations and higher frequencies and to tap into your soul. I think you can do that in so many different ways through beautiful meditations, through a great yoga class, through being out in nature. So I certainly think that there's a lot of different ways that you can achieve those higher states of vibration and that same feeling of peace. And it's just different for all of us. And finding the modalities that help each of us is it's part of the journey. I believe that those of us who get sick with chronic illness is because we are being called to wake up deeper, being called to wake up to who we are in our heart, our soul, our spirit, and maybe somewhere along the way we got out of alignment with what we came here to do. That's okay. That's part of the human journey. So finding the modality that helps us heal and helps us realign with who we are. I think that's what it's all about. And I think for some people that can take decades, like me. I mean, I really started searching on this path, soul searching, I would say, when I was about 14, when I was very young and I felt very out of place in the world. And sometimes I think people can find it a lot faster. So there's a lot of things that have helped. I think I've always felt so connected to yoga, like you're saying, because yoga is such a beautiful physical practice that also is such a wonderful escape for the mind. And I always needed something like that. So, yoga every day. I try to get on my mat every day because it really brings me so much peace.
And if someone's listening to this right now, and maybe they hadn't even heard of Lyme disease before or considered it a potential diagnosis for them, but they're relating to a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of the symptoms, what would you recommend to help get them to the right starting place? Where would they go and who would they connect with to get started and find out if they actually have Lyme?
Yeah, so anybody listening who feels like they might have Lyme, I would recommend finding a Lyme literate doctor in your area. So you can do that by going to, there's a website called the Global Lyme Alliance.org. It is a nonprofit organization for raising awareness for Lyme disease. And also, they do a lot of scientific studies and they're just doing a lot of good things for Lyme. They have a database of Lyme literate doctors all around the world, definitely around the country of the US, but I think also around the world. And you can find one of those doctors in your area, request the IGeneX Lyme test, and go from there. And then there's so many different ways to heal. There's a lot of like anti-inflammatory supplements just across the board that I think would help everybody. But it just depends on how severe your case is of Lyme and also what your symptoms are. Because some people with Lyme disease are so bedridden, they lose their ability to walk. And then other people are walking around with this invisible illness and to the outside world, they look fine, but they are suffering inside. So there's so many different ways that the disease can present itself. And I think whatever way you choose to heal, your intuition knows. So just don't compare yourself to anybody else and find the perfect regimen for you.
Let's come back to your diet, because last time we talked, we got into when you went from vegan to breaking vegan, the title of your book, the onslaught of negativity you got from at least part of the vegan community at that time. So here it is, you've made this shift and written this book, and then you went back. I know you said you waited a period of time and you were doing it just for you in the beginning when you made that dietary switch. But when you finally went public with the fact that you were back on the vegan diet, how did the vegan community embrace you?
Well, it was interesting. So with that, I didn't really make any like huge announcement about being plant-based again because it wasn't about that for me. It wasn't about like the first time around, I made this huge announcement. I'm not vegan anymore. It got international press. It was very overwhelming, and it was a huge topic of conversation for like 3 or 4 years in my life. Every interview I did, that's all anybody wanted to talk about. So when I transitioned back to the plant-based life, I just started talking about it subtly. Like I would just integrate it into an Instagram post or a blog post and just kind of be like, by the way, I am plant-based again and it feels amazing. And so slowly people started noticing. But I think a lot of people don't really read so closely. So a lot of people weren't seeing it because there wasn't a huge announcement, some big dramatic thing. Because my belief is the way that I eat is for me, it's for my health, it's a personal choice. I like to share it because I share my life, and I hope that the way I live can help inspire people to do what works for them and to really embrace whatever healthy lifestyle they feel works for them. So, because I didn't make this huge announcement, it was really only support that I was receiving because the people who were seeing it, they're like, oh, that's great. That's really interesting. So, more recently, I've made a YouTube video about it. I've done a podcast all about it just because people are curious and people still come across me, even though I've been plant based again for close to 3 years. People are like, wait, I thought you wrote Breaking Vegan. I'm so confused. So I can lead them to the YouTube video or whatever else just to say, I became plant based again intuitively, and it's great. And I did have some people in my life when I became plant based again almost kind of warn me, like, you don't want to label yourself again. You don't want to get yourself into that position again. Don't you remember how the vegan community treated you? So I haven't been huge on the labels. I definitely identify as vegan and plant based, but I try to just, keep telling everybody I'm doing this for myself, and I'm not going to let the vegan cyber bullies who bullied me about my health and my life and my body and everything for all this time intimidate me from calling myself vegan again because I'm just as vegan as they are. But also, it's not about that. It's not about the label. For me, it's about doing intuitively what feels right for my healing, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, and really living in this way that feels really beautiful to me and really aligned. My husband is vegan now too, so we have a lot of fun making meals together and exploring vegan restaurants everywhere we go when we travel. It's been great, and this time around, I think I've learned a lot, so it is certainly not restrictive the way that it was for me years ago when I really did take a more restrictive approach. But I've learned so much more about plant-based nutrition. I got certified in plant-based nutrition from Cornell online. That was really cool. Something that I did during this quarantine just to keep learning. I'm always learning, soaking in new information and education about the plant-based way of life so that I can educate myself, but also talk to my readers and my listeners about it and really help people find a way of life that feels good for them.
When did your husband make the switch to veganism?
He started being vegan this year, so it was one of his goals. He likes to challenge himself every year to do something different, not just with diet, but with fitness. And he's done things like he did an Ironman, he went raw vegan for a period of time. So for 2020, his challenge for himself was to go vegan. And he's been fully vegan all year and he loves it and he feels really good.
Nice. And it's not essential, but it is nice when your partner has the same dietary philosophy and way of eating.
For sure, for sure.
Now I'm going to take another quick break from my chat with Jordan to give a shout out to my show partner, Blue Blocks. Blue Blocks makes the best blue light glasses out there. They have the blue light lenses for daytime use when exposed to artificial blue light, like when you're working away on your computer, and Sleep Plus lenses that are designed to be worn 2 to 3 hours before bed to optimize sleep and recovery and also balance hormones. Both these lenses also come in kid size. The lenses can all be customized to prescription, non-prescription, and reading magnification. They have stylish unisex frames to suit every taste. If you're new to blue light glasses, I recommend starting with the Sleep Plus lenses. You can easily slide these on in the evenings to help you sleep better. And you can get those at 15% off as a listener of the show by going to ultimahealthpodcast.com/blueblocks. Again, that's ultimahealthpodcast.com/blueblocks. And Blue Blocks is spelled BLUBLOX. On top of that, they offer free shipping worldwide on all orders over $100. Get yourself a pair of the Sleep Plus lenses and start sleeping better. Now I'm going to give a shout out to my other show partner, Perfect Keto. Perfect Keto MCT oil powder is a high-fat powder made from real coconuts, and it'll help keep you full and satiated during intermittent fasting or anytime you feel hungry. It's a mess-free powder for easy mixing, and it's completely clean with no artificial sweeteners or junk. You can use it in the morning in your coffee or tea as a delicious creamer, or in the afternoon to curb your hunger. A great idea would be to get a second bottle and keep it at work to help you focus before work or a big meeting. My wife Marnie likes to use the vanilla MCT oil powder mixed with coconut milk, dandy blend, cacao butter, collagen, cordyceps, and hot water. She stirs that together with a hand blender, but you could also use a regular blender as well, and drink this back in the mornings. As a listener of the show, you get 20% off by going to ultimahealthpodcast.com/perfectketo. Again, that URL is ultimahealthpodcast.com/perfectketo. That's 20% off the whole Perfect Keto lineup. On top of that, their products ship worldwide, and if you live in the US, you get free shipping. Get yourself some of the Perfect Keto MCT oil powder, the no-mess alternative to liquid MCT oil. And now back to my chat with Jordan. I know Marnie and I, when we were both plant-based back in the day, and then we both transitioned to a more paleo-ish diet that we're currently eating, it's just been nice, obviously, to be able to, like you said, try restaurants together and just be in that same mind frame together.
For sure.
Earlier, you mentioned the SOS, the no sugar, no oil, no salt. And I'm just curious, where did you first come across this and why is this part of the way you eat?
So I first came across the SOS-Free way of life when I was healing at the water fasting facility, the first one that I went to right before I got diagnosed with Lyme. And I didn't even know that this facility was a salt, oil, sugar-free, really education center. I was just there for the water fasting, but they do a lot of education about teaching people to transition to a plant-based and SOS-free way of life for healing chronic illness, managing chronic pain. A lot of people go there for healing all different types of ailments and diseases, and it's been incredible because I've been back about 4 times now, and I've met so many people who have really healed through this very alternative way of eating, and for me, it's fun. I love to develop recipes. I think it's delicious. I'm definitely a little bit more relaxed about it lately because I have been feeling quite a bit better, but I know whenever I need a tune-up, I go fully SOS-free. I was fully SOS-free for more than 2 years, including at my wedding and on our honeymoon and all those things, because that's how I feel my best. What it means is it's salt, oil, sugar-free, plant-based diet, all whole foods from the earth, fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds. And it really just removes those very addictive foods of salt, oil, and sugar. And also, they're very highly concentrated because a lot of those foods are refined and processed. So it's really just cutting out refined, processed foods and eating food from the earth, which is very healing.
So when you went and did your water fast, was this at True North?
Yep,
Okay, and they're the ones that taught you the SOS.
exactly.
Got you. What's the longest water fast you've ever done?
2 weeks.
Wow. Yeah, you mentioned 2 weeks earlier. I didn't know if that was the longest you had done. And
Well,
this was with assistance at True North.
exactly. Actually, 15 days. So 1 day longer than 2 weeks, which when you're water fasting, let me tell you, 1 day, it means a lot.
Every day counts, I can imagine.
Yeah, so 15 days. That was actually this year. And yeah, it has helped me. It has really drastically changed my life.
So what is it you've taken from that and brought back into your day-to-day life other than the SOS? Are you doing any periodic, like shorter water fasts at home?
When I was really, really, really in deep healing mode, I was water fasting pretty often, like 1 day a week, or at least like 1 to 2 days a month. And now, not so much, just because I did 2 longer water fasts this year. And at that point, at the end of the second one, my body really spoke to me and told me, now it's time to eat. We did it. We did the fasting. Fasting has immeasurable benefits. If and when I feel the intuitive pull to do it again, I will. But now I'm really enjoying eating and feeling like a healthier person. And it might sound crazy to people who have never had to do such drastic things to even feel remotely good in their body and live in the world. But for those of us who have been there, we know we would do anything to even feel remotely okay on a day to day basis. So, yeah, I learned a lot about fasting. I feel like, if anything, it has given me so much compassion for people who are going through something really challenging. It has made me so mentally strong. So, anytime I feel chronic pain or if I get hurt or something physically, I kind of feel like this is nothing compared to what I've been through. And that's a very common mindset for people who've been through something like a water fast, because you just realize how strong you are. Our bodies can do anything. I did my last water fast with 2 friends who also have Lyme, and we talk every day, 2 of us, like, we are so strong. We can do anything. Remember what we did this year? Like, we can do anything now, and that feels really good. So, mentally, I've gone to really deep places during my water fasts that have shown me everything, honestly, about who I am, what my purpose here on this earth is, what inspires me, the way that I want to spend my time. And I've changed my life and my business a lot, basically because of getting sick, but also because of doing these deep inner healing work like water fasting, plant medicine, etc., that has really shown me my life in a brand new perspective. And I'm so grateful for that.
Do you find after doing a number of water fasts that it gets easier over time?
No. I wish it would get easier over time. It actually, I think, gets harder, which surprises people, but it gets harder because it goes deeper each time, I think. Like, the first water fast you do is kind of like the first layer of healing. You're going past some viruses, some bacteria, some mold, things are dying in your body. None of those things can live in an environment where you're fasting. So, like candida, all that stuff, parasites, it's all going to die. You're going through the first layer of that in your first water fast. So, for some people, maybe that's the hardest. For me, it's only seemed to get harder and harder because you're going to deeper and deeper layers each time. Some people probably only need to do one water fast in their life if they're even interested in doing any. And then others of us, as I've explained to my very well meaning family and friends, anybody who's ever expressed concern. For example, when I was going back to do my third water fast, my dad said, "Why are you doing another water fast if they didn't heal you to begin with?" And I was just explaining to him, for some people, like myself, one water fast, two water fast is not going to heal you. but maybe if you do enough, it will contribute to the healing. And I just think in our bodies, we know when it's time to do something like that. And I wouldn't push myself and force myself to do something that didn't feel aligned. But yeah, it only gets it only gets harder and harder, to be honest with you.
And what would a day look like? Are you basically sleeping quite a bit and watching TV shows and movies and stuff like that, just relaxing? Or
Yeah,
are
you're
you
just
going out for gentle
relaxing.
walks, or what does it look like?
No, so there's no energy to really walk or anything. Maybe for the first couple days. If anybody's ever like fasted for a day, they probably had decent energy. That's normal. But once you get into the second and the third day, it's really important to conserve your energy. So you're basically just resting. I think a lot of people go into a water fast thinking that, oh, I'll finally have all this free time to write a book or to start this project or read all these books or something. Most of us who are water fasting, you're really just resting because you really don't have the brain function when you're that tired and there's no glucose going to the brain to do a whole lot of things cognitively. You're just resting. For me, I happen to lose my voice when I water fast, so I can't even really talk on the phone to people after like 4 or 5 days. It's a lot of resting, watching movies, just being really easy on yourself. I find that the connection with nature is very heightened when you're fasting. So I like to go outside and kind of just like lay on the deck or something, backyard, depending on where you are, and soak in nature, communicate with the trees. Just time kind of goes differently when you're water fasting. You could say time goes faster, time goes slower, time just changes. So, yeah, I've had days where I just fully laid outside all day and it's very peaceful, but it's also very painful and hard.
So obviously during the water fast, you're taking a break from work. And earlier you mentioned that I think it might have been early on in your healing journey, you were pushing through and still putting up blog posts and podcasts and such. So talk about that, the ebbs and flows and the breaks you've had to take throughout the healing journey.
Yeah, so ultimately, I've worked quite a bit during my whole healing journey, and I feel very grateful that I have the type of job that, I can do that. I can work from home, I can create content from my bed and kind of keep my business going when I want to, when I need to. But taking some time off has also been really important. So, last year, I took about 3 months off my podcast. That was huge. That was something I never really thought I would do, something that I never thought I would have the courage to do because I previously really identified myself as blogger, podcaster, content creator, and who am I if I'm not doing these things? But when I finally let go of that and realized and learned that I'm Jordan. I'm Jordan Younger Albrecht. I'm this wonderful person with or without my brand. Then I was able to give myself a lot more room to heal and find a lot more purpose and who I am and my relationships that I have with the people who are close to me. So last year I took 3 months off the podcast. I really didn't put out any blog posts for a while. I definitely wasn't going on other people's podcasts or anything for probably like a year, year and a half, 2 years, just because I did not have the energy to do anything other than potentially record my own podcast, which I wasn't even doing there for a while. And yeah, that it took me a long time to get to that point, but taking that time off was important. And I'm grateful for the time that I've been able to take off. And like I mentioned at some point in this conversation, getting tested for Lyme and getting treated for Lyme are both extremely expensive things to do. And people ask me about that all the time. How do you afford to heal? How do you afford to do these healing modalities? And I like to be really honest with people and say that I work really hard. And even during most of my sickness, I didn't take much time off. I didn't really take, for a couple years, not even really a day off other than the weekends. So I work really hard so that I can do these things like go to water fasting facilities and do things like stem cells. And I also think it's really important to have conversations like this one that we're having right now to raise awareness for Lyme so that hopefully one day Lyme will not be such a taboo subject, and hopefully health insurance will start to cover more and more treatments for Lyme, more alternative treatments, things that are actually helping people, because it's very unfair. And I have a lot of compassion in my heart for people who are in the same amount of pain that I'm in, but they don't have access to any of these healing modalities and treatments. So I also like to share about them publicly. I kind of feel responsible to talk about everything I try so that people can at least become aware of it. And at least our healthcare system here, I know you guys are in Canada, but here in the US, a lot of things need to change. And it will be exciting as the years go on to see Lyme hopefully more recognized, and those of us with chronic illness more supported as a whole by the medical community.
Well, earlier you mentioned the huge impact per year. You said 400,000 people are being diagnosed with Lyme. So this is a hugely significant number. So I think sharing your message the way you are, so raw and so real and vulnerable, is just so important for people. And I'm sure even what we've discussed here on the podcast today is just going to help so many people. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on.
Jordan, before I let you go, I want to talk quickly about a post I was looking up on your blog before we jumped on the call here, and you shared your current morning routine. And part of that, you talked about having your celery juice in the morning. So I'm just curious, was this the medical medium influence doing that? I'm guessing it must have been. And have you dug into a lot of that medical medium work and applied that to your Lyme healing?
Yes, I have. So I'm a huge celery juice person. I've been drinking celery juice pretty much every morning for about 3 years, 2.5 years. And medical medium has been a huge influence in my healing. Anthony, I've had the pleasure of becoming friends with him, having him on the podcast a few times, and he's taught me so much. I don't necessarily agree with every single thing that Anthony, says about Lyme. And I know it's very controversial because people feel Lyme can be contracted in a lot of different ways. Anthony sees Lyme as more of a viral issue than a bacteria issue. But the medical medium healing modalities are amazing. And I take a lot of the Lyme supplements that Anthony recommends, like licorice root, zinc, all these things that get our immune system up and also kill the bacteria and the viral load. So when I'm eating like a medical medium diet, for the most part, is actually when I feel my best.
And I know he has quite a few books out now. For somebody with Lyme, would you recommend his first book, or where would somebody start?
Well, actually, his latest book, which is Cleanse to Heal, it's a very, very, very comprehensive book. I've gotten it for so many people in my life, my family. I've read it a few times. He covers so many different chronic illnesses in that book, and then offers different ways to heal, different cleanse programs and things that will help you. So that's probably what I would tell people, because he does cover Lyme in that book. And then if you feel called to his other books, his thyroid healing book is pretty amazing. A lot of people with Lyme end up having hormone issues, so like thyroid issues and different things. So I love his thyroid healing, his liver rescue. He's got a lot of good books.
Awesome. We're going to link them up in the show notes. And Jordan, I just want to thank you again for coming on here and being so real and sharing your story. And I had a lot of fun catching up with you.
Me too. Thanks so much for chatting with me again. And it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And how can the listeners best connect with you after the show?
Well, they can come say hi on The Balanced Blonde on Instagram, thebalancedblonde.com. I also have a podcast, Soul on Fire. They can come say hello in any of those places, and I would love to connect.
All right. It's all going to be linked up over in the show notes. And Jordan, take good care of yourself. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I really love that conversation. I hope you did too. So much in there. Jordan was so raw and real. and went into such great depth sharing her story and her healing journey, and it's definitely inspirational, and I hope you took a lot away from it. Let us know what you thought of the episode, what you took away from it over on Instagram. You can tag The Balanced Blonde and at Ultimate Health Podcast. You can take a screenshot of the player as you're listening, a short video clip, or a picture of yourself, and we'd love to connect with you over there. For full show notes, head over to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/368. There's links there to everything we discussed today and so much more, so be sure and check that out. Before I let you go, I want to give some love to my editor and engineer, Jace Sanderson over at podcasttech.com. Jace, thank you so much for all the hard work you put in. It's much appreciated. And this week's fun fact is that I'm loving my new Oura Ring. This is something I thought about getting for quite some time. I've had it for about 2 weeks, and I'm loving tracking all my sleep data and steps. Have an awesome week. Talk soon. Wishing you ultimate health.